Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I have such a treat today. You ask and I listen, and here she is. I'm so excited to talk to Annie Gough here. Annie, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. You have no idea how many people wanted to hear from you. So I'm really, really honored that you said yes and that you're here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Anna. I'm excited to be here with you.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. Okay. I start off the podcast, where in the world are you coming from? Where are you sitting?
Okay, I am in Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
Currently, yes.
Yeah. Okay, have you always been to Denver?
No, I actually grew up in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
And went to college there. Mm-hmm. And that's actually a whole story on how I ended up a pre-med major. And spent a year as an autopsy technician in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
Which was a really good place for homicides and suicides and vehicle crashes. Yeah. And during that time, I found out what a medical illustrator was. Mm-hmm. And I applied to grad school. So I ended up moving to Georgia for grad school. Then I was hired by a law firm in Dallas. And then I took a job as an art director in Denver, and that's how I ended up here.
Okay. Let's unpack this a little bit because this fascinates me. And I know I'm not the only one. All right. So what was your undergrad in while you were an autopsy tech?
Okay. So I was actually an autopsy technician right after undergrad.
Okay.
So I went to college and I wanted to be an art major.
Okay.
And my mother would not let me be an art major.
Yep.
It was actually a conversation. It all happened within like 15 minutes of a conversation. It's a chapter in my book. It's hilarious in the beginning where I'm at freshman orientation for college. I'm with my mom. We're figuring out where do freshmen live? Where are the dormitories? What cafeteria? Where do you park? What parking lot? All these things. Yeah. And they're like, okay, divide up into majors.
Right.
And so I just start walking over with all the art majors because I was really good at drawing and I loved it. Mm-hmm. And my mom was like, no. What are you doing? I was like, Mom, I can be an art major now and change my mind later. Mm-hmm. And she said, no. What else do you like? Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I'm really good at chemistry. I like my anatomy class. They let us go to the medical school and look at the cadavers. She goes, why don't you go pre-med? Mm-hmm. I was like, Mom, I don't want to be a doctor. She said, you can change your mind later.
Yep.
So anyway, I was a pre-med major in undergrad.
Okay.
Graduated. I knew I did not want to be a doctor. I did not want the responsibility. I was really afraid of having to tell someone that my patient had died or their daughter had died or it was very heavy to me. Yeah. But I knew someone had to draw all the pictures in the books. Mm-hmm. Like, who did that? Yeah. And I didn't even know what medical illustration was yet, but I had a better atlas. Uh-huh. And I was like, okay, somebody does this. I just didn't know what it was yet. And so there I am. I've graduated. I have no job. I'm not going on to med school. Yeah. So I ended up becoming an autopsy technician for the county coroner. And I did that for 6 months. We did 250 posts.
In 6 months. Wow. Yeah, I know it's funny that you say that about your mom not letting you be an art major. I had the same conversation, not my own story, but my daughter, my youngest daughters, my oldest daughter is going to nurse. She graduated with a biology degree. She's going to nursing school. My youngest daughter is a freshman in college. She loved art. She's digital art. She's good. She's good. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I also had that conversation with her and said, you know, I don't know if you'd really make any money. I was kind about it, but I was like, it's just not the way to go. She ended up getting a job her senior year in high school at a CPA office. And she goes, Mom, okay, I really love business. Perfect. Business major, and then minor in art. Yes. You can draw your anime or whatever, you know. She's so I that resonated with me because I remember having the same conversation. I was like, you know, I love your art, but you know, I guess that's what we do as moms.
And I would have loved to have minor in art.
Yeah.
But at the college I went to, it wasn't offered.
Oh.
You're an art major and you were on that track, or you were not. And so I had to go to the dean of the art school every semester. Diane Dollar. Thank God for that woman. She was amazing.
Yeah.
I went in the beginning of every semester and begged her to put me in an art class.
Wow.
And she's like, oh, there you are again.
Yeah.
This girl wants to draw anatomy. Great. What class am I going to fit you into?
Yeah.
She broke the rules for me every semester.
You were able to. That's so cool. Okay, so when you were an autopsy technician and you clearly already knew you wanted to draw anatomy, did you kind of do that on the side as you were going through this? It's like practice. I mean, I don't know. What does that look like for you?
I wish that I had spent more time sketching the bodies. But honestly, it was a job and it was hard and it was go, go, go. Sometimes we would have 5 posts in a day. And I worked under 2 different medical examiners. And one was very difficult, and she wouldn't have allowed for that extra time with the bodies. But the other one would have. So it was just kind of like, what did you get that day? How much pressure was there to get stuff done? Obviously, if there's like a composition, you don't want to hang out in there and do sketches.
Right.
So I think I came away from that entire experience with only one drawing that I did.
Interesting.
Of a gunshot wound that was very cool.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Now, for those of us that don't know what an autopsy technician does, just in a nutshell, what does it? What would you say? Like, if you're talking to somebody in an elevator, really quickly, what does an autopsy technician do?
It's actually, oddly enough, exactly what a first assistant surgical nurse does.
Wow, okay.
Except the patient is not alive.
Okay, gotcha.
So the medical examiner is the MD that is doing the external examination and internal examination of the dead person. And it's usually an unnatural death. If it's a natural death, sometimes an autopsy is done at the hospital, but in the coroner's office, it's because something is suspicious.
Right.
And so the autopsy technician stands on the other side of the body from the medical examiner and moves up and down and hands them tools and weighs organs and takes toxicology samples. And, you know, you have vitreous, you have blood, you have DNA blood, you take it from different areas for different tests. And I have to admit, if the autopsy was someone that had maybe died in a motorcycle crash, and it was very obvious why they died, the autopsy technician would sometimes do a lot of the autopsy. While the medical examiner was, you know, making her notes, taking, you know, doing everything that has to be done by the medical examiner. But then if it was a homicide, the autopsy technician was there to do whatever was asked, but was a lot of times a little hands off.
Got it.
Because in a homicide, the police are also there. They're scoped in. You know, the photographers stay the whole time instead of just in the beginning. We used to x-ray the bodies before we did the post. So yeah, I love the puzzle, like the mystery, finding out what happened. We had like some really fascinating things happen while I was there.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, obviously you have to have a stomach for it. Just like being an OR nurse, there are not everybody is meant to be in the operating room, as we can tell. I have caught people fainting. Thankfully caught them before they hit the floor. But
really weird, but you have to eat.
yeah, exactly. Or stand against the wall, please.
Yes.
So you clearly, that didn't bother you, and you were fascinated with the puzzle side of it. Were you always that way? Where like you were fascinated with the body, or, you know, blood and guts didn't bother you, or it was like you couldn't wait to get your hands on? What was that like for you?
You know, I think I was always okay with it. So in high school, our anatomy class did get to go to the medical school and see cadavers.
Right.
In college, during pre-med, we did have a cadaver lab. And we had such a big class that there were only a handful of students from the gross anatomy course that were elected to be on the dissection team. So I was on the dissection team. There were like 10 of us that did all the dissections.
Right.
And then the rest of this class would come in and we would present the dissection.
Yeah.
So I think I was already kind of,
you were meant for it.
Dead bodies. And
yeah.
After working with so many cadavers that are soaked in formaldehyde and they're beige and they stink, I mean, this sounds really gross, but it was really nice to work with fresh bodies.
I know, I get it.
And it was just the miracle of what happens to tissue is just wild.
I can totally relate to that. Relate to that. I watch it every day, and it is fascinating to see. Just like, you know, a mechanism of injury. You know, I work at a trauma hospital, and you just see, and you're like, how the heck did that happen? And it is fascinating to just. That's what a human body does. So
it is. It's really crazy. I remember we had a car crash come in, and it was so close to the coroner's office that the ambulance brought the body straight to us. It was still warm.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah.
That was a unique dynamic to realize that I'd been working, everything was cold, right? Came out of the freezer in the morning, you know, body bag, see what you got. But yeah, warm was...
Yeah.
You know, you take a step back and, you know, a little gut check. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to move on from our autopsy technician. It's just fascinating because it's just something that you hear, but I've never met anyone that's worked in that. And like, you're right in front of me. I'm going to ask you the question. What is it like? What do you do? Okay. So then you moved on. You said you had discovered the medical illustrator, and you knew that was where you wanted to go. How did you discover that? Just within being in that environment?
I actually had a friend whose father was a surgeon.
Okay.
And he knew, I think I saw one of his Netter atlases, like his human body and anatomical atlas. And I was like, oh, I have one of those. I love these pictures. These are so cool. And he really pushed me into looking for more and more of that kind of work. And then he had me talk to another physician that knew a medical illustrator at the Mayo Clinic. Okay. And so I called this woman, and it's so fun. I don't remember who she was. Sat at so many cocktail parties with so many medical illustrators and at conferences trying to figure out who this woman was at the Mayo Clinic. It would have been like 1998. I called her, and she's like, oh, yeah, there's medical illustration graduate schools, and this is where you go, and this is how you apply, and this is the website. And that was that. And then
that was that.
I applied to school.
Okay. And so you really got exactly what you wanted, right? You got to use your art skill set And you followed what your mom said, follow into the medical field.
Yeah.
So what was that schooling like? I mean, were you just like in heaven? Obviously, it was difficult, but
amazing. So at the time I applied for the medical illustration, it's a master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, there were 5 medical schools that offer a master's of illustration.
Okay.
And they're such small programs, and they're at the medical schools. So as a medical illustration student, you apply to the master's program. I went to the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta, Georgia, where they take 8 students a year into the illustration program.
Yeah, okay.
So there's 8 freshmen and 8 second years. So there's 16 of us in the studio, but we are assimilated into the entire medical school. Like we are with the medical students taking all of their classes.
Oh.
So there's like the 8 of us in gross anatomy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we're mixed in with the other students. We didn't have our own bodies. Like, there's 4 to every cadaver. Mm-hmm. And so I was with 3 other medical students going through gross anatomy. Mm-hmm. And then it was the first 2 years of medical school, but it was also learning all the art, traditional techniques. So on top of everything we were doing, we had to produce art. We had projects. We had projects with timelines. We had projects that didn't. We learned Photoshop and sculpting and watercolor and 3D modeling and animation. And it was so much fun because we were such a small group. Like we just we loved each other. Like medical illustrators are such a unique breed of like medically and like blood and guts people that like to draw.
Yeah.
Like we are a weird, special kind of geek. And when you get us all together, we geek out and we are so happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our annual conferences are the most fun.
Right.
You just look forward to it every year. It's like when you get to be for 5 days with people that just talk about blood and guts and draw pictures.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's such a small, select group. I mean, I come from the nursing world where there are a lot of us. Mm-hmm. And you can narrow it down to the operating room, and then you can narrow it down to being a first assist, and it's a very, very small community. We don't really to see each other because there's only 3 or 4 of us that work at a hospital at one time.
Right.
So I get just how you have this connection that nobody else has. Mm-hmm. And it just makes you guys even more special, and you celebrate that. I totally love that. I get it. I never even heard of it. The irony is that we've seen drawings, right? I live in LA, and there's a bookstore in downtown LA. It's called the Last Bookstore. It is the coolest bookstore I've ever been in. And it's got every kind of book you can imagine. And, it's in LA. And so there's these, kind of crazy books. And I happened to go through this like special section. And I found, in fact, it's sitting over there. I found an illustrative anatomy book, and it was clear and crisp and still wrapped, and it was old though. And I was like, I'm buying that just because I think it's so cool and it's so detailed. And I just bought it. I opened it like one time because I thought it was so cool, and it's sitting on my bookshelf.
Right.
So I can appreciate just how difficult. I mean, I looked at those illustrations just in that book, and it's like it's fascinating that someone actually draws those things. So and you just don't think about it. And I, like you said, I didn't know there was you could get a master's in that, and it's just so cool. I think it's so cool. I'm like fangirling out here.
So only 44 medical illustrators graduate with a master's every year.
Wow. It is so small. That's amazing.
There's like 2,000 of us in the world.
Wow.
Because there are, there's like also bachelor level programs, there's certificates. like in Scotland and in Australia, like in other countries, they have different names for it, different degrees. But only 20% of us do litigation.
Okay, and so that my next question was, you have this degree or you're, proficient in this. Where do people end up going, to utilize that? What does that look like? I know where you went, but where do typically people typically go?
So just like that beautiful book that you bought, a lot of people go into publishing for healthcare, for anatomy. Okay. Some people are like, well, haven't they already drawn the entire body a million times?
Right.
But anatomy changes. Things change. We learn more. Things need to be described in other ways. So most medical illustrators go into healthcare, graphic design for healthcare, patient education, surgical planning, 3D printing, like in the pharmaceutical world, like medical illustration is not just gross anatomy, it's also proteins and molecules and DNA replication and intracellular. So a lot of drug research, pharmaceutical work, grant writing, like the COVID molecule that was illustrated by the medical illustrators at the CDC. They have their own department, which unfortunately that department's probably getting canned right now. Medical illustrators go into anaplastology. They do 3D printing. Also, there's medical illustrators can also just do all of these exact same things for veterinary.
Right.
The whole animal world as well. Animal surgery, animal commercials, flea and tick, whatever,
Right.
Yeah.
Digital. And it's all, the things you don't think about, but it makes complete sense. So there are plenty of opportunities for someone to just do something.
Exactly.
So you chose, did you initially choose to go into the legal side of it?
Not on purpose.
Okay.
So when I was at the medical school, there was an attorney that wanted to hire an in-house medical illustrator. And we had all learned what medical legal illustration was. We had done a project in litigation.
Okay.
But my professor, because of my background in trauma, doing autopsies, out of all 8 of us, he's like, you should really go interview for this job. Like, this is more up your alley than anyone else because you have a background in trauma. And so I went and I interviewed at the law firm, and I was there for 5 years. And it was literally going from 2 years of medical school to basically learning law, like going straight into the law firm and what's a deposition, what's this, what's that, like it was really intense.
And I'm guessing that you were, you loved it. You're still working in the field. So you decided once you started working there that this was where you wanted to kind of hang your hat in this side of medical illustration?
Yeah, like initially, like my first couple cases were really emotional.
Okay.
I had my first 2 cases were children. Really just horrible negligence, horrible outcome, wrongful death. And I realized that now after doing autopsies for a long time, after studying from cadavers, when you work a case in litigation, now you're working with the survivors, the parents, who's left, what happened. And it was very emotional. And it kind of took me by surprise. I kind of felt like karma was getting me back. For being able to not feel that side of it. But we were just so wildly successful, and I was great at it and just kept going. And I just rolled with it and just built an entire career on it.
It's a whole nother layer of things you don't expect. I think that's with anything you jump into, right? I mean, I know for me with jumping into legal nursing, there were so many facets of it that I didn't realize were a part of it. Like the connections, how important the connections were have connections with other legal nurses. I had no idea. And then once you start working, oh, wow. Oh, yeah, no, that's actually really important to have connections with other legal nurses. Hence this podcast. I think it was like,
Right.
oh, that is actually very valuable, in the long run for success. And I had no idea. So there's all these layers that you just kind of jump in and then you realize, oh, wow, okay, there's more to this than I thought. So I'm guessing that's the case. Okay, so you were there for 5 years, and what made you decide to leave? Where was that next step?
So we had a birth trauma case that we were working on in the law firm, and the medical expert, the testifying expert, wanted a digitized fetal monitor strip.
Okay.
And in my brain, I was like, okay, I can figure out how to scan the pages. I was like trying to, like, he's literally talking to me and I'm imagining how I'm going to put this together.
Sure. Okay.
And how it's going to flow and how you can use it on the computer. And he can hear my brain thinking, right? My squirrel is on the wheel. And he's like, no, it's okay. He goes, I know someone that does this because he testifies in birth trauma. So he does it all the time. And of course, when you're a medical illustrator, you get all kinds of different cases. So you get to dabble in all kinds of different parts of anatomy and scenarios.
Right.
But anyway, he's like, no, there's someone that does fetal monitor strips. Just call them. And so I called them and I ended up developing a relationship with them. And they were based in Denver. And after a couple months, they're like, would you like to leave Texas and move to Colorado? I was like, yeah, definitely. And so I left. And, I was an art director at their studio and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. So I was there a year and a half and I started my own business.
Yeah, and that was like what led you into, okay, now it's my turn. Now it's my turn to do this thing. I got this. So how long ago was that you started your own? You just went off on your own?
I started my business in 2007.
Wow, you've been going strong for a long time now.
I know.
Good for you. Okay, so what does your business look like now? I mean, do you have people that work for you as well? Do you have other medical illustrators that work for you and you kind of contract things out, or are they just your own clients?
So I don't have employees.
Okay.
I have a subcontractor that is phenomenal. She has 18 years experience and she's been working with me for about 3 years. She also is an animator.
Oh, wow.
So she came out of school just 3 or 4 years after me.
Yeah.
But that's how much the technology had advanced. So her her animation, her 3D animation skills are great. And so she helps me subcontract other artists.
Got it. Yeah.
And honestly, it's a very difficult balance for me because I have attorneys that I've worked with for over 20 years. And when they call me and they want to work with me, I want to work with them.
It's yeah.
But if I have too many cases on my plate, you have to decide, okay, who's going to work this one? Who's going to work this? And sometimes the more simple trauma ends up getting done by someone else, even though I'll overlook everything.
Sure.
An ankle fracture.
Sure.
I've done a million of them. So I can send them all my other ankle fractures and be like, make something like this.
Right.
This is the radiology. This is the operation report.
Yeah.
And then the medical malpractice cases really take the most time and concentration and effort. And you have to be hand in hand with the medical expert the whole time. And so I end up doing a lot of the medical malpractice cases.
Right.
But like even right now, I have 10 cases I have to finish in 8 weeks, which is, it is truly and literally impossible.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get all the records in so I can figure out who can do some other things. And it's hard for me to have that conversation with the attorney and say, you know what, Sarah's going to work with you on this, or Asha's going to work with you, or Mike is going to work with you, but these are my trusted people.
Sure.
And, there's only 400 of us to go around.
Yeah, I
And there's
know.
97,000 attorneys, injury attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
And
That need
it's kind of, it's heartbreaking. Like, I want to work with everyone.
I know. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a struggle. I have a lot of work on my plate right now.
Yeah. Which is a good problem to have. It's a really good problem to have.
It is.
So tell me a little bit about what that looks like. So an attorney says, I need your help. Mm-hmm. Can you please make this make sense to a jury? I'm assuming. So you take that and what do you do with it?
So a lot of times the attorney will call and be like, I'm going to trial in 2 weeks. My medical expert wants an illustration to use in trial. And I'm like, first of all, you're crazy. You're going to spend a lot of money on a rush job and you're not going to be prepared to use it.
Right.
Call me next time you're getting ready to file suit. And I'll work with your medical expert. We'll do the drawings for the deposition. We'll use the illustrations in the deposition of the plaintiff and the defendant to get out the right information that we actually need to do the illustrations that we'll then use for mediation, that we will then use for trial. And by the time we get to trial, the opposing counsel is not going to fight the drawings because they're so used to them. We've been using them the whole time to teach the case. So I don't like to do rush stuff for trial.
Right.
Unless it's someone I know really well and essentially a case has been sort of overlooked or dropped by another attorney. So they've picked it up and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to take this right away. Let's figure something out. We can do something basic.
Right.
But I really like to work way in advance, like start during depositions or when you're actually choosing the medical experts. So a lot of times, first of all, as you know, now that the medical record is electronic, it's off 14,000 pages. Like as an attorney, please do not pay your medical illustrator by the hour to go through 14,000 pages of medical records. Call your LNC.
There you go.
Summarize it and then give that summary to your medical illustrator.
I love it.
Everything is better. So attorneys also get operation reports and they get radiology reports. They read them and they assume them to be truth. But I'm like, no. Send me all the images. We want to see all the scans. Intraoperative fluoroscopy, everything. Because often there are purposeful or not purposeful omissions or errors in the operation reports and the radiology reports. And if you can give me enough time to go through the radiology, I guarantee you we can find nuggets of gold that amazing deposition.
Absolutely.
So I want it way in advance because I want to do the best that we can for the client. I don't want to
You want the images themselves, right? Not the report. No, I get that. I just had a surgical case, actually it was a trauma case that I had helped on this week, and it was a motorcycle accident, really bad ankle fracture. We finished. There was like a gap in bone, and he brought in a podiatrist and said, I think this guy's going to need ankle replacement. Can you follow up? Well, then 2 days later, I'm at work again. Patient's back on the schedule, but he's on the schedule for a calcaneus fracture. And I was like, wait a minute. So I go back and I look at the images themselves. And those initial trauma images, you can't see the calcaneal fracture. And even when he shot the intra-op fluoro, we were looking at the ankle, and so sure enough, the podiatrist brought the patient back, and there was post-op images that had the hardware in it. I could see the calcaneal fracture. So those first images, those trauma images, you didn't see it at all. But then the subsequent post-op image, there it is. It was there from the beginning. So looking at the images is incredibly valuable. So I get that. You need all that information. And I don't think that, I don't think that attorneys understand that. Like, well, this is what was read, and they could have been just completely missed too.
I have had so much fun finding unique things in radiology films that show that there's like a complete and total lie in an operation report.
Oh,
It's just,
yeah. Interesting.
wow.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And the attorney never would have caught that.
No. So clearly you are well versed in reading, radiology, right? Reading scans and x-rays and things like that.
I'm obviously not a trained radiologist, so
sure.
I very often will call a radiologist colleague, be like, hey, I got 3 cases. You got 30 minutes for me?
Right.
And we'll just whip through all the images on Zoom. I'll already know exactly what questions to ask, what I want to look at. Is this what you see here? You know, like, am I seeing this correctly? Is this actually a surgical flip?
Right.
You know, what is this? Yeah. So
that's interesting.
Valuable.
I'm speaking my language. I could geek out on this all day. My anatomy, we were talking about this before you started recording. My anatomy skills as a first assist, it's just, gotten 1,000 times better than being a circulating nurse, or even many, many years ago, I was a scrub tech. We never really paid attention, but now obviously I have to pay attention to those things. So I can totally geek out on that. And that, you're just putting those puzzle pieces together too.
Yeah.
So you're speaking my language.
That's another thing that kind of can determine what cases I take, is like the interest level.
Oh, totally.
So I had a case one time. It was on the East Coast. The university called me. They had a surgeon it was a defense case. The surgeon was being accused of not removing a gallbladder. And I was like, well, wait a minute, tell me the story. And they're like, well, yeah, the patient came in. He had horrible gallstones. They removed the gallbladder. I go, is there a pathology report? They're like, yeah. And they're like, and a photograph. I'm like, so there is evidence of the gallbladder outside the person's body.
Right.
On a towel. Like, it's gone. But then, like, a year later, he has another gallstone attack.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, and we need to defend this doc. And I was like, I want this case just because I want to read these medical records. I want to know it.
Totally understand that.
It was a great case. The recurrent gallbladder.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Totally understand that. Yeah, and you're in a really great position where you can do that because you've been doing this long enough, and you've got a great, base of clientele, and you can pick and choose. And I give you a high five for that. That's amazing. It's a great.
I mean, if I could say anything out into the universe, is that every attorney needs a legal nurse consultant. Like, please go to an LNC.
Speak it to the people in the back.
Yes, please call the LNC. Yeah. And then have that person then give me the records.
Right.
Like, do not dump the full medical record
thing on you.
Like, the attorney, they send me the billing, they send me the affidavits, and everything is organized by provider. I'm like, I don't know what this person saw. Like, I need everything. I need you to start with the 911 call.
Yep, exactly.
Then send me the EMS. Then send me the police photos. Like, we need this in a chronological order.
Yeah. I think I've said this a few times on this podcast. I was on an OR podcast, and we were talking about documentation. And they were, it's like, in a nutshell, like my elevator thing, in a nutshell, what do you do? You tell the story, you become a storyteller. What happened from the beginning to the end in detail? Just tell the story, patient's journey from beginning to end. That's how you need it. Put it together. And that's exactly, we get those records, thousands and thousands of pages. And that story is all over the place and repetitive and all those things. And my goal, put it in a story, like what happened beginning to end. So yes, make your job easier. I agree with that.
And then sometimes the attorney will be like, oh, it's just a simple ACD, plane car crash, neck surgery. I'm like, okay, great. And in my brain, I trust them, and I don't know why I'm trusting them, but I trust them. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that really quickly. But then I get the imaging. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. They had 2 previous surgeries. Wait a minute. We got to go all the way back.
Right. Story changes.
Where did they start? What was the original hardware? What hardware was removed? What did they look like at the time of the crash?
Yep.
Sometimes that's not normal anatomy. No. Sometimes that's something totally different.
Right.
I'm like, oh man, I'm like, this is not going to be quick.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this tonight during dinner. This is going to be a process. You got to go back. You got to re-request everything.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What is your favorite thing to do? To draw, to 3D? What is your favorite thing? If you could do it every day, you'd be like, although you probably like variety too, but what is like your favorite thing to sit down and do?
So this is kind of gross, but it falls in line, of course.
Hey, we're talking to nurses here, but it's all good.
There is something very beautiful is the word that comes to mind, but it isn't. Okay. There's something that I really like about the way ribs lacerate the liver and the spleen. Like the pattern of the lacerations. Like there's something about that that I like. You don't see it very often.
Yep.
I like to draw that for some reason. It's unique. It like in a week where I'm not really, really busy, I enjoy the search of finding where the negligence is.
Okay.
But when I'm really busy, all I'm craving is to get to the very end of my job, which is where I just sit and color.
Yeah. No, I was thinking that actually as you were talking. Yeah.
Just coloring. I did an airway yesterday and I was just coloring. I'm like, like when you get to the point where you don't have to think anymore. You're just choosing colors. Yeah. I love that.
I was thinking that after I had asked the question, because I thought, you know what, you have kind of the best of both worlds. You have this like intense, very detailed and you've got to, really focus and you don't want to miss a word. And then, both sides. And then you've got the other side of it where it's, art is therapeutic and, you can relax and breathe and rest your brain and all of those things. So you really do have the best of both worlds. And I can totally see that being the case. Sometimes I try and think of ways where I try to find those because typically, I'm sitting here working on a case. There are times where I can just grab pieces of information and I don't have to pay attention quite yet until I put it all together. So I'll have like a documentary on over here. And that's where my other side of the brain is like, relaxed. I'll pull things out. And then once it's time to put the story together, turn off the documentary and then it's focus. But that part is not necessarily my favorite part, is putting it together. So I like peeling those pieces out. And those pieces aren't that hard to peel out for me. So I can kind of keep that like, let's let this side of the brain breathe a little.
It's right brain, left brain. It's the analytical and the creative. And
you have both. You have the best of both worlds. You have to be analytical, but you get to be creative, and then that's your final product. Is like the combination of both of them. I'm so jealous because I can't draw. So, but I appreciate the creative side, though.
Like, for example, I was working on a fatality case, and there are often, not always, but more so now, X-rays of the bodies before the autopsies are complete. And I was already to the point where I was just drawing. I was just coloring in the bones, and I was working from the X-ray, and I'm in like my bliss state. And I get to the skull fractures, and I realize that the skull is not fractured like a skull is fractured. Like the skull is fractured along the suture lines.
Interesting.
So I'm like start to look at the X-ray, and it's like the suture lines have split apart. Like the skull burst open under internal pressure and not being crushed.
Right.
And I immediately called the attorney. I'm like, hey, when are you talking to the medical examiner? Can you add some questions in for me? Because like found something kind of weird. Can you just ask? Like, is this unusual? Is this not unusual? And it helped us. At the same time, I'm also, managing the animators that are animating the crash. I've like subbed, I've contracted with another group that's going to do the crash recon.
Yeah.
And so we were able to find out some really like delicate, nice comments from the medical examiner about the skull that helped us show her head in the way.
Animate
the crash of what. It's just fascinating little things.
Wow.
I think make it more important for the client.
For sure. You just, because you paid attention to how different that was, you noticed it and you took it further, that you made this big difference in a particular, family's life or whatever. And those are, I think that we can relate to things like that too, where we find, a red flag that, I found something recently that was like, wait a minute, everybody missed this one lab result down the line. And the same thing was like 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. I texted my attorney. I was like, I found it. And then that made a big difference down the line. It was like, this should have never happened to this patient. There's something that's missing here. And sure enough, boom,
there it is.
Find it. And it's like, okay,
so
now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's just such a good feeling. We always call it, it's like the one line that is there, that because I've looked at thousands of medical records in 25 years, there it is. I'm able to make a difference. So, and you as well, because you're overseeing those things and you're trying to put it together. I'm putting it together in words, but you're actually putting it together visually. You're like, there's a story here.
Right. And so that's what I find is such a unique time when it actually is, when it is time to go to trial, because the attorneys, the legalese, and they're used to the speaking and the telling of the story and the way they craft their arguments, and they can use words like maybe or a little bit or kind of, but when you're drawing it, it either is or it isn't. Like it's either right here or it's over here. Like you can't figuratively imagine something in a drawing. It's like, okay, it was either here or it wasn't. And sometimes to get those answers for me to do my job, I need an LNC. I need an expert. I need someone above and beyond what the attorney wants to say. I'm like, I know you want to say this, but we really need to know.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you shared that. Okay. Now you also mentioned you have a book. Can you share that book with everyone, what the name of the book is and where they can find it?
It is called Injury Illustrated.
Okay.
How medical images win legal cases.
Love it.
It is on Amazon.
Okay.
It was published by CRC Press, which is the same as Routledge textbooks. My original goal of writing the book was I wanted to get it into a law school or potentially lots of law schools.
Right.
For law students to understand about visual storytelling using demonstratives, tort law. But what I'm realizing is many law schools don't really teach injury or med mal, kind of something that comes later.
Yeah.
So if anyone is a law professor that would like to do a class or an elective on visual storytelling, on anatomy, basic spinal anatomy, all these kinds of things. So anyway, I wrote the book with the goal of educating young attorneys, educating medical illustrators, educating maybe medical students that didn't really love medicine, that wanted to do art, or inspiring artists that probably have the ability to be medical illustrators and animators.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, why not do what you do for medicine?
Yeah.
For science, for molecular biology. Yeah. And it got a little autobiographical.
I love it.
So it's kind of like a nonfiction textbook with lots of biography and story, and they're all real cases that I worked on, and it's gory and it's funny, and some people just like it because it's a really nasty coffee table book.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, I'm getting it. No. Yeah. But this would also be, would you agree it would be a great gift for, like, maybe you have an attorney that you would really love to gift, that it would be very valuable.
Oddly enough, I think I know maybe a dozen LNCs that have given my book to their attorneys.
I know that. I saw that. Actually, that's why I said it, because I was like, wait a minute. I've seen people say that they've shared your book and given them as gifts and just love it. So it dawned on me. That's why I said the gift thing, because it sounds like it's perfect. So
it's a good Christmas gift. It's a good happy new office gift. It's a happy, great settlement gift.
Yeah.
It's also a really good gift at Halloween when people want to be creepy.
That's great. I love it. Hey, you know what? That stands out. It'll make you stand out. If you send a Halloween gift, nobody sends Halloween gifts. It's perfect. Oh. I love it. It's great. Okay. So now, where else can we find you? Let's just say we have an attorney that needs your services instantly. Where can we find you?
My website is the same as the title of the book, injuryillustrated.com. Okay. I'm on LinkedIn. I share images on Instagram, which I've been doing less and less because of copyright and the whole rabbit hole of that. But you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at my website. You can just Google me. I have an unusual job and an unusual name. I'm pretty easy to find.
Yeah, totally. I found you very easy. Okay. Well, all of that will be in the show notes, including your book and everything. So I really appreciate this conversation. I could talk to you for hours and geek out of this for hours. So I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. And I'm sure that you will get, as always, people get influx of, inbox messages and just hearing your story and people, resonating with your story. So I look forward to that. And I look forward to staying connected. So thanks.
Thank you. I want to work with you on a case.
Oh, let's do it, girl. Let's
dig up some red flowers.
Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at Anna Gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.